So we are here to talk about the ones you didn't burn. I first saw this at Fright Fest, and it's about to get a UK release. But I think before it did get the UK release, it toured the festival circuit. How do you think that experience helped the film?
Um, I don't think the film would be where it is now without the festival circuit. And this is, of course, this was my first feature, and there's all of these pressures and politics around like a debut and where to go first and have your premieres and everything. But so we did Chattanooga as our world premiere, which was virtual actually. And it was, to me, like, Chattanooga really loved the film and got it, and they asked us to be the opening night film. There was like no question. And I feel like maybe another filmmaker would be like, oh, we need this big, South by Southwest or like something, but that was that experience. The fans and the people that are loyal to that festival are just like the best people in this community. I think some of the best people until I got to Fright Fest. They're also amazing people too. But they just gave me so much confidence as a first-time filmmaker, and them not only loving it, but like really understanding it. And then from there, yeah, it followed to Fright Fest, and that was like and that was the first time in the theater, right? And that was so surreal. And meeting the fans in person. We went to a pub, and they're like, "Oh, you're a filmmaker," like blah blah blah. And yeah, just the pouring out of support makes it feel like, okay, it's worth it. You put all this work in, so many years and hours, and for people to like really enjoy it. I think at the end of the day, I mean, it's great to have a release and sell it, but that's, to me, the core of like being a filmmaker is connecting with the people, the audience at festivals. So hope that answers your question.
But
I can keep talking.
there's also the aspect of at festivals you're there with other filmmakers who are on a similar journey. You've made films that obviously fall under some similar umbrella, so it must be nice to get to spend a week or a weekend with like-minded people who understand just how hard it is to birth these ideas into life.
Oh, completely. I mean, I'm still friends with a handful of like really good friends with filmmakers that were premiering there as well. And Jeff from Mean Spirited, Kira from Living with Chucky, Addison from A Hypochondriac. And it really felt like, wow, we were like alumni together in a way. You know what I mean? Like we were in the same class. And it's so, I mean, that was something as a filmmaker too. Like I really started in acting, and I have such a strong acting community, but I really didn't have a strong like directing writer community. And this has given me that too, especially from Fright Fest, being able to interact with these amazing artists. So it's great.
Yeah. And like you say, as well as directing, I mean, there's many roles in this film, but you also star in it. When you were conceiving the idea, what was it about Alice that stood out as a role that you wanted to play? Because I guess, some people, there would have been the vanity of like, I want to be the lead, but you haven't done that.
Oh yeah, I mean, trust me, I tried to cast myself out of that pretty early on. I wrote it, obviously, I wrote all the characters for all of us, including Sam Dunning, who plays Greg, and he's like an incredible filmmaker. He's working on his directorial debut right now, actually, that he's also acting in. And but I knew I needed him on set, with me to help. And so I wrote this character for him, which I thought he would be great as, which is funny because it's such a terrible character. And then obviously my partner Estelle, like writing this ethereal, beautiful, strong, powerful woman and she was doing everything else too. I wrote Alice definitely like inspired by myself. I'm like, okay, I could be a farmhand, witchy, bi-curious character, and but at the end of the day, like it really came down to just convenience, not having to cast another person and have another body on set because it was during COVID, and another bed, another mouth to feed. So it felt like the economic choice to put myself in. And it worked out, you know. I think that it's funny, I forget sometimes that I'm like in it, you know, and just because you do so, it was like the smallest piece of the puzzle that went into this for me, at least, you know. Um, but as a writer director, I love acting in my work, but I actually prefer to see another artist like take on my words, you know, and see what they're going to bring to the character, because I already know how I'm going to do it,
Hmm.
but I love to see how somebody else is going to take it on, and yeah, that's the fun of it, right? So
Yeah, and like I say, this was a very, very hands-on production. Like you said, it was a very limited cast and crew, so everybody kind of had to take on a variety of different roles. You're looking through the credits, you've got, you know, your lead actors are also, you know, helping out with camera and various other things. I guess, like you said, that was partly in terms of COVID restrictions and budget, but I was wondering what benefits you feel that gave you, keeping it so intimate and such a small core cast and crew.
that's a great question. Because it felt like a once in a lifetime opportunity to have such a skeleton crew
Mm.
of friends that are, everyone was collaborating on this because we had to, everyone had to like have their fingerprint on it, you know. And I was talking to David Lawson, who he's a mentor of mine, and he's with Rustic Films, and he was interviewing me for CFF, and I told him, I was like, oh, that I really, you know, that was once in a lifetime, blah blah blah. And he said, no, it doesn't have to be. You can really continue that throughout your career, to keep your crew and cast like very small. And I mean, to me, the benefits are, it's, I can't compare because I haven't worked on like a very huge set. I mean, our next film is going to have much more crew and cast and everything like that. But to me, the intimacy of it brought such life, I guess, into the film. And you can really feel, at least I feel, and I've heard from others too, the love of it, you know. You really feel like the love behind it. And I think that's because everybody had multiple roles, so we all cared about it in more than just like this
Mm.
one singular thing, you know. But yeah, I would like to continue that way of filmmaking throughout my career, and maybe I can, we'll see. So
Yeah. I think that is something a lot of the time, especially with actors, they kind of feel a bit like spare parts sometimes, because, you know, they're waiting for everybody else to set up the scenes and that. So I think that by having them involved in such a way, it gives them a bit more, not necessarily more to do, but it makes them feel, when they watch the final project, that they've done more than just say somebody else's lines. They, you know, they can go, oh, I helped, you know, light that scene, I helped, you know, pick out that costume or whatever. So I do think it does breed a very different sort of film.
absolutely, yeah, you know, as an actor too on set, you're treated so like a little kid, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, here's your corner, here are your snacks, and then here's the, you know, you hold the AD's hand while you walk to set. It's really funny. And I absolutely feel that has benefits, because yeah, I mean, ultimately the actor is the one that like is telling, in at least for the audience, is like holding up a huge amount of space and telling this story. Um, but yeah, like you said, I think there is that element like of feeling like, you know, you help make the sausage of it, and you're not
Yeah.
just like hyper focused on your own performance, and almost maybe lets go. I mean, I think for me too, like a lot of, as an actor, a lot of my takes were like 1 or 2 takes, because I didn't have time to really even watch the monitor. I just was like, either Sam or Estelle were on monitor. I'm like, is it in focus? Yes. Is my makeup okay? Yes. All right, then we got it. You know, I didn't have time to like prep and get into it. It was kind of just like, go with the flow, you know. And I hope that Nathan and Jenna, who were, you know, the leads of this, felt that benefited their performance too, because I think they do a wonderful job, you know.
Yeah, one of the things I really like is these several almost as montages, I guess, where there's like several scenes that are all unfolding. Or there's the scene in the car where Alice is driving, and she's I guess in a normal film they would be having a conversation, we would hear it, but this is all sort of set to music. Just wondering, was it always the intention to do it like this, or was that something that came about during the edit?
No, it was always the intention. There was actually way more montages. Nico, when he was doing the second round of editing after Brett, he was like, "You got too many montages. We gotta cut some montages." Yeah, I mean, I was super inspired by Dan Rigura's music, the composer, and yeah, his music. I was writing the script to his music, not he had different music that I was inspired by, and then he ended up writing an original score. But I think when you have such an amazing palette to work with from there, then you can't help but get these like trippy visuals that are in slow motion. And but it actually did really add to the story because there's so much that's in Nathan's mind we can't tell, and it does have this like dreamy quality, and it almost makes the viewer feel like they're being seduced with the other characters. So yeah, it there was montages were always part of the film, and I think they just got crisper in the edit. They got more intentional, I'll say.
Yeah. And there's lots of the film where you're filming in and around nature. With such a short shoot, did that cause any problems? Because you've got bits on the beach and then you've got bits on the farm. Was that a
Yeah,
nightmare?
well, it was I gotta say, like, it was crazy. I mean, obviously I wrote it with my friend's farm in mind, Jesse Wellen. It's Halsey Farms. He's like a 12th generation farmer, and he was the one that was like, yeah, you can make a movie on the farm, and that's all his land too, and I got the history from him, passed down through generations. But they didn't burn any witches. I just want to say that for the record. Because I don't want to get into trouble. I can say that very firmly. But yeah, no, and of course with COVID, making sure there was a lot of outdoor shots, because of not only with open air and no one's breathing each other's, germs, but also shooting wise, using a lot of natural light. So we didn't have to spend a ton of time like doing setups and things like that. But honestly, it was shot in my hometown, and I've said now a few times that I felt like the film was almost like a love story to where I grew up, because I moved home after, like, when COVID hit in March, back with my parents, and kind of fell in love with the area, and going to the beach. I mean, a lot of those scenes are like straight out of Mirra sprinting on the beach and then breaking down sobbing. That's straight out of me. And the reconnecting with old friends and things like that. So yeah, I mean, but in terms of the difficulty of shooting in nature, I gotta say, we got crazy lucky with the weather, and just, I mean, the ocean, every day it changes. It has a mind of its own. One day it will be flat, the next day it will be like huge waves. And I always say, I think there was like some witchy power going on during this shoot, because even, I mean, Kat, like during the bonfire scene when we're all tripping on acid, we're all on the beach and we see this like giant orange sliver kind of coming up over the ocean. I'm like, what is that? And then we all realized it was the moon rising. And we had no idea it was this harvest moon, which is super rare. And it's the harvest farmers. And we were just illuminated by this giant orange ball in the sky. And it felt like, I'm a spiritual person. So it felt like a higher power kind of like wanting this thing to work out with us, So, and I believe in that for sure for the shoot. I mean, every step of the way, but that in particular.
I think you need these elements, because as much as the film is about witch trials, thankfully, for once not set in Salem, because obviously Salem's the only place that had witches apparently. Why they felt the need to burn them, just box off Salem if it's Salem.
I know.
But also witchcraft is Wicca is tied to the elements, and this you bring this in through so many of the visuals. Yes, there's the ocean, but then in the colors, you know, certain characters are dressed in different ways. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the visuals of the film and what your intention was.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, of course, there's the history of witchcraft, but there's also a lot of history in modern witchcraft, you know, and in a way, you know, I'm not practicing witchcraft myself, but I've done a lot of research. But from my like outside perspective, it always felt like, and this goes back to history too, it felt like just really strong, powerful, beautiful inside and out women who were always just getting things taken away from them because of their independence, you know. And in terms of in terms of the elements, I think that a big inspiration for this film was my girlfriends, who are fit that category. And one of my friends does incredible tarot readings, and during COVID we went to the desert and we like did this camping trip, and she read our cards like under the stars, and we were just, it felt like, you know, like a ceremony. And and I feel like I haven't, you know, I mean, there's definitely stories that have been told about witches, both modern and historical, that don't do this, but I feel like there is, you know, still ingrained in our psyche, like in our culture rather, witches be this like old, ugly, you know, black hat in the dark over their cauldron, and that's really not what witches are or were, you know. In fact, they were farmers, and they were midwives primarily too, and that there's a whole history tied to that. And that was brought in, you know, Estelle's character Scarlett, that breathing acid scene, heavily inspired by that. And and the spells and the witchiness that they're making, that all is herbs that come from the earth. So I felt like I wanted to explore that a lot, and hopefully I did all the witches right in this. So
yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people of my generation, sort of my touchstone for witchcraft is sort of what I learned from the craft.
yes.
You know, and it is, you know, you sort of, you get past Nancy, and it is a lot of, you know, the elements, you know, each one of them represents a different one. And here you've not got a four, but you've got a triangle in a way, and you've got the earth and the fire and the water all represented.
Yeah. And the hair, I mean, that was lucky too, you know, the red hair, the yellow hair, and the brown hair, straight out of Hocus Pocus.
Yeah.
It's like, that was like totally accidental too, you know. Obviously Estelle and I didn't, not like, hey, dye your hair red, dye your hair blonde. There's a lot of things that came together for this film, but yeah, and the elements for sure, that was definitely on purpose.
Yeah, 'cause I think that's one of the strongest things is it is a film that does have some sort of witchcrafty elements to it, but you say it's not your stereotypical, you know, black hats or, you know,
Totally.
old women or anything, but it does feel like when you're watching it, it is easily identifiable as, yeah, this is a witch story. And I think it probably is that subconscious thing of, you know, the Hocus Pocus hair and you know, growing up seeing, you know, four girls called the corners and things.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you know, it's funny that you say that, because I've had our first mini screening was like a handful of friends just to kind of test it out. And one of my friends didn't even get the witches. Like he was so focused on the addiction element, you know, and what Nathan was going through. And that was definitely for me too. Of course, it's a witch story to me, but it's also an addiction story and a family drama. And Nathan kind of dealing with the grief of his father and the historical demons that he has to fight. And I would argue that somebody could watch this film and see it totally without any fantasy type of element, and kind of put the whole thing in Nathan's demise to addiction and grief, and kind of following the same path as his dad.
Yeah.
And, are these women witches, or are they just like strong, powerful girls that he's threatened by because of his sexuality and his addictions, and they're to have this power over his sister, and they're stripping him of his land and all of that. So I like that element always, to have that ambiguity, and most people see it, of course, as a witch film, but it's funny when you do get those few people that see it more as like a family drama, which is great.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think some of the best sort of films in the genre are films like that, like Midsummer. You can look at in a multitude of ways. It's a woman finding her independence from external forces, and the worst boyfriend ever. You can see it as
Yeah,
you can see it as a breakup film, as
absolutely. Yeah. And I love when you're like, you can't take sides in the end, you know what I mean? And everyone that watches it, like, well, it's funny, there's actually, I gotta just talk about this one scene in particular, and I hope my dad's okay with saying this, but when I was first showing the film to my parents, that scene where Alice and Nathan are like outside of Greg's party, and he sees the tattoo on her leg and all of this, my dad was like, well, she's clearly leading him on and like really trying to like, flirt with him and all of this stuff. And me and my mom were like, why do you think that? He's like, well, and it was really funny. It was like a very solid split between, the genders. And I think you could look at that scene like, oh, she's definitely trying to, hit on him and blah, blah, blah. And another person be like, she's just being friendly. And it's kind of this back and forth. And I'm pretty sure we even shot it. I acted it twice, like one just being very just casual, and one kind of being more like seductive-y. And we cut it together like they did in American Psycho. The director did that, the interrogation scene with Willem Dafoe, like one where he knows that it's him, and one where he really doesn't. And I think that's an interesting element too, of like people not being able to kind of pick a side, like, are we on Nathan's side or are we on the witch's side? They're getting their revenge, but they're also like, poor Nathan is going through it, all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. I like in that scene, there's a couple of shots where Alice is sort of larger in the frame, and she's closer to the camera and is larger, and then he's sort of smaller. So it's a nice sort of like early indicator that his power is going to be changed soon.
Oh yeah, and not to mention I tower over Nathan. Like there was that scene when he like comes up to my face at the end, and I'm like, oh my god, that was so tall. But finally, my height works in an advantage for acting. In so many cases, it's like, you're too tall, blah blah blah. But this, I'm like, very very domineering. I guess it's funny.
I guess now that The Ones You Didn't Burn is going to be out in the world for all to download into their homes and watch, how's the follow-up coming? I think last time you were saying it was a title called It Comes Back.
Yeah, wow, good memory. Yeah, no, we are thick in pre-production, and we're shooting in September. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely another psychological horror. This one's much more horror though. I'm excited to kind of like stretch out my horror legs, because that's what I'm really passionate about, is bringing audiences in to be scared, but then ultimately having this message behind what we're trying to say. And yeah, huge inspiration for this film is Jennifer Kent's The Babadook, which I'm sure you're a fan of, because it's just, I think it's a piece of genius, and it's not only terrifying, but yeah, it's a metaphor for motherhood and grief and depression, of course. And it's done so well. It's so, you can tell that they were on a restricted budget, and she really uses those elements to her advantage, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to do the same thing with this one. And it's but it's about trauma and what happens to us if we try to forget about it and suppress it, and it comes back to haunt us. And yeah, that's the ultimate message. So
cool. Well, I look forward to seeing it.
Me too. I'm nervous for you to see it when it comes out, but I know you'll shoot it straight with me. You're always honest, which I appreciate.